Welcome to Codex, History of Video Games. My name's Tyler Osby.
And I'm Mike Coletta.
And this week we've got a game, one of the games of all time to talk about.
I went into this not knowing a lot, and I always want to do this now. I always want to go in not knowing a lot because we're gonna open by me saying that I was pleasantly surprised by Shaq Fu.
Oh
Okay?
man. This is a
Yes.
game that I've heard about a lot. You always see it on worst games of all time list, but I've never actually looked at it. Like I couldn't have told you anything about it. Based off the name, I've been like, maybe it's a fighting game, but I don't know.
Honestly, dude, this game, it surprised me for the better. Like, there's still some things, and we'll get into that, but this game, I'm leaving it as a positive experience. Unlike certain games that are bad games that we've covered, a la Duke Nukem Forever, even though, again, I also don't really regret playing Duke Nukem Forever. I feel like I played history, but in this sense, I feel like I played history and I actually had a lot of fun while playing it. So we'll get it.
It's different depending on how much you paid for it too. If you bought it for $70 in the day, you might have been disappointed, but playing it for cheaply today.
And I should mention that when Shaq Fu came out, it sold all of the copies that they were shipped. That's what EA swears by. I'm kind of skipping ahead into the Grime Fact section, but they didn't mention that they sold a lot of them for heavily discounted rates. We'll get into it. So let's open with Grime Facts like we always do. So this was developed by Delphine Software International. It was published by Electronic Arts. It was released on October 28th, 1994 on the Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Game Boy, Game Gear, and Amiga. The best way to play, and what people argue is the best version of the game, is mostly considered to be the Sega Genesis version. That's how you should play it. That's how I would recommend. That's what I played. Now, I will let you know, I did play this on my Miu Mini. That's how I played it. But I played the Sega Genesis version specifically. That's what I played. That's the version I got. So the number of copies sold, again, no sales history really of how many were sold, but EA does insist that they did ship all their copies. Like they sold all of them, they said. But once again, we don't really know like how heavily discounted they were. So
100% of the copies sold.
Exactly. The genre or gameplay style is a fighting game. This is 100% a fighting game. You're squaring off against an opponent. There's nothing else really about that. We'll get into more of it later, like the ins and outs of it, but that was it. The average time to complete, I beat the game in probably about 45 minutes to an hour, if I had to guess, and I was using save states. So I would say that you could probably beat it in 1 to 2 hours.
Does it get kind of difficult? Like you may have to try some stages multiple times.
We'll get into that because there's one stage that I am not happy about because I feel like the game just becomes so different, and we'll talk about that. The game ranking score, because again, this is in a time where there was no Metacritic, but we just have game rankings. Based on 4 reviews, there was a 44.5%. So it did not review well. It got kind of panned in reviews. The sources today that I'm using, by the way, this is kind of a new section I want to put in here when I do video game ones like this. So like just specific games instead of a book. I used an article from Hardcore Gaming 101, their article on Shaq Fu that was written on April 17th, 2013. But the more official one that I found, and actually the better source, is Next Generation Magazine. Their 40th issue from April 1998 has an article called "What the Hell Happened?" And they talk about games that didn't go well. And Shaq Fu is mentioned in there. And I actually got some quotes from anonymous developer info and one of the VPs of EA talking about Shaq Fu. And that's really kind of all I could find about it. Because personally, I'm kind of jumping ahead again, but I wanted to find something with Shaquille O'Neal talking about the game. But whenever he's asked about the video games he's in, he just kind of talks about like owning an esports team because he owns part of Energy, I believe. And then he also talks about how Shaq Fu did have a new game come out in like 2018. We'll talk about that a little bit at the end. We don't really covering that game, and I'll kind of tell you why at the end. But he doesn't really mention like the time of Shaq Fu, I guess, of the initial Shaq Fu.
It seems like maybe he didn't have a whole lot of involvement. They were just like, hey, can we give you a bunch of money to put your face on this silly game? And he was like, I like money. Sure.
Yeah. I mean, they did put this specifically for him though, because they knew he liked martial arts. So he had that kind of influence on it. Like they tried to pick something that they knew he would like. It's not just a straight basketball game, but I would agree with you mostly that he didn't. It was not like he was in the studio with them, like trying to like he's not designing characters or anything. But okay, so gameplay wise, Shaq Fu is a 2D fighting game where players take control of basketball legend Shaquille O'Neal. That's right. So I personally only really played Shaquille O'Neal in NBA Jam. Did you play NBA Jam?
I didn't play very much NBA Jam. I played College Slam, which was the same game but college teams, and it was made by the same company. Like it's all
Midway? Didn't Midway
it
make
was
NBA
Midway and
Jam?
Acclaim on Super Nintendo. Yeah, it literally was just NBA Jam but college teams.
That's really I never played College Jam.
Yeah.
We should have a day where you play some NBA Jam with me and then we switch and play College Jam. That would be
Okay.
fun.
Yeah.
I would love it. I mean, NBA Jam that has the classic like he's on fire from downtown, like you're
So does
breaking the
College Slam.
backboard.
Yeah, same stuff.
It just feels so good. Yeah. But that's where I would play as Shaquille O'Neal from the Orlando Magic when he was on the Magic. And that was my favorite basketball team only because their name was Magic. I was a kid growing up in Alaska and I liked Wizards. So that's what I did.
You could also play as Hillary Clinton in that game.
You could?
Yeah, it was a cheat code.
Oh, I never knew that. Have we talked NBA Jam? Have
I
we
don't
done
know
an
if we
episode?
have.
That would be a sports game that I think now that we know you and I both have really strong feelings about, we might want to cover. That'd be fun. Okay, so you play as Shaquille O'Neal. You're traveling through various stages, fighting one-on-one with each set of enemies. And there's like I will say that it's not a very in-depth fighting game. We'll talk about what you're really supposed to do in it, but I want to just mention one thing, and that is that in the game, Shaquille O'Neal's fighting style is called Shaquito. And one of his special moves is he throws like shuriken, the little like throwing stars, right? And they're called shakuriken. So that's important. I just wanted to mention that. It's important up top to mention those things. It's not really a big factoid, but it's good. It's really good. So
Anytime you can get the protagonist's name in there,
a
you're,
lot
you're
of
doing okay.
times you're
Yeah.
doing the time. I should also mention that when you like win a match as Shaquille O'Neal and you're done, and I don't have this in the notes, I'm just talking now, but you beat a guy up and then he stops and just this kind of like run in place move when he like gets really amped and excited, like he's like showboat dancing. It's pretty great. I like it. A popular misconception of this game, though, because it came out at the time of popular fighting games like Mortal Kombat, is that it's just a Mortal Kombat clone. I would say it's not a Mortal Kombat clone. Big thing is there are no fatalities in this game, mostly because Shaq Fu, from what I read in that Hardcore Gamer or Hardcore Gaming 101 article, it was that they were so concerned at this time about your games being legitimately banned because Mortal Kombat was banned in certain countries that
Yeah.
they're just trying to sell copies, right? They're using Shaquille O'Neal's likeness. They're trying to sell as many copies as possible. So there's actually no blood in the game. If you want blood, you have to turn on a cheat code to get blood in the game.
Oh, well, hey, at least they put a cheat code in.
They did. So they gave you the option. It's kind of the opposite of like GoldenEye, where you turn on paintball mode when your mom was in the room, and it's like it's just paintball. And then it was really bloody. Otherwise, it's the opposite. You got to turn blood on for Shaq Fu if you want to. So that's the first part about like the misconceptions of the game. And while Shaq Fu is a fighting game, I would say it's not really like super conventional. And I'm just going to read this quote from Hardcore Gaming 101 about comparisons to Mortal Kombat. So, quote, Shaq Fu is more as its own game, though. You won't find combos, cancels, or any other fighting game conventions. Shaq Fu is more about countering, outwitting the opponent, and finding openings in the other player's strategy, end quote. And as I was playing this, as a guy who was just mashing buttons for the first like 10, 15 minutes I was playing and winning still, I should
All
mention,
right.
there is some strategy to it. So the strategy that I found worked best if you're just trying to like beat the matches is jump around a lot. And then when you can get the enemy character in a corner, jump in front of them and then just spam your like your quick kick, essentially. That's like the best way to do it. But there are some things about this. We'll get into it in a bit. I'm kind of like jumping all over the place. Let me stay on my script here. Okay. So I played the story campaign, and the story campaign is actually pretty cool. it starts with like an art slideshow cut scene where Shaq is in town for his all-star basketball game and he finds a kung fu dojo and the story starts. We'll get into that a little bit later. But the game has this like strong don't bore us, get to the chorus vibes. Like they just kind of throw you in the action right away. And I kind of respect that. And the gameplay in the story is you have an overworld where you're a little tiny Shaq on this really cool digitized like map, right? And you walk around this map and you like select your fights. So you actually have a choice in what order you fight the 6 characters because it's
Ooh,
like 6.
non-linear, huh?
It's 6 the first section, then a bridge opens, then it's 3, then there's a second boss, and then there's a final boss, and that's kind of how it's done. So that was a fun little detail that they didn't really have to include, but they did, which I thought was really neat. The fights themselves are all with a unique character, and the settings are really cool. There's like a beautiful randomness to this that you would find in 90s games where they're just like, we're going to combine every possible genre we can think of. So, for example, I use the second island. The first fight, if you do it like in order from closest to farthest, going down the island, you fight a cat lady in the jungle, and then the next fight is you fight a metal super soldier in a secret lab, just jumping all
Sure,
over the
why not?
place. And the fight before that to unlock the bridge is just like a older kung fu master grandpa mentor figure. It's really weird.
He's got to
So
fight Mr. Miyagi before you.
exactly. And so they're just throwing in as many 90s tropes as possible. And as a guy who grew up in the 90s, I'm here for it. Like if they just somehow threw pogs in there, I would have been into it. You know what I mean? If
Hmm.
somehow there was a pog mechanic, I would have been all about it. But as far as the controls go, I was playing on Genesis and it's pretty basic. You have your movement on the D-pad. If you press up on the D-pad, that's how you jump. And then you have a quick punch, a slower, stronger punch, a quick kick, and a slower, stronger kick. I found, like I said before, the best strategy is just to get him in the corner and use either the quick punch or the quick kick, and you can spam that and really get hits in. I would try to combo, and I couldn't do it, and it's because of the controls. And I'm going to explain that when I get to kind of my gripe section here. But there are combos, and like I said, and I played the game, so I couldn't really figure them out. I would say that this is like the downside of the emulation, though, too, is key mapping. So the quick punch on my Miu was X. The slow punch was the L bumper. It wasn't the fourth button. The fourth button just didn't do anything. And I'm sure I can remap that, but that's just one of the qualms of emulation, I think. And I was just like, honestly, I was like, I just want to play the game. I just want to
Mm.
get into it.
That's not the game's fault.
It's not the game's fault. No. And this is not really a gripe. This is like, if you play it on Genesis, you're not going to have to worry about this. In fact, the combos are probably easier to pull off if you're playing on native hardware. So I would say that's something that you should keep in mind if you do want to play this game and actually like see all the special moves and stuff. But the one thing that I did do that was like a throwback that really got me is I did consult some sweet ASCII text strategy guides from GameFAQs that were like drawn in, and they actually label each chapter like 4.1, 4.2, so you can control F and quick jump
Oh,
to it.
man, there was an art to those guides back in the day that just doesn't exist anymore, and
It's
it's too bad.
memories. It's memories, man. Like I loved it. It gave me fond memories. And so the whole time I was playing this game, it really felt like that. And it was really fun. But I was able to determine though, there is a system in this game. Like when they talk about in that hardcore gaming 101 quote I read that it's about countering and knowing what move to do next. There is a system in which certain, I guess, certain moves will not affect an opponent based on what like state the opponent's in. So, for example, if you try to do Shaq's flying kick and you hit an opponent that's crouched, it will do no damage. It will miss. On your screen, it'll
Interesting.
just look like no damage happened, but you will miss.
But the
Quote
physics will look like you hit.
It'll look like you hit, but it won't do any damage.
Okay,
And that's what the system is that they're talking about, the countering system. And
gotcha.
if you consult these like ASCII guides I found, they actually have like a chart of like this move will not affect this character if this character is hitting the back button, or if this character is hit like crouched, or if this character is jumping. Like that's how you dodge. So if you were going to get really into this game and you wanted to memorize everything, you could consult these guides and be like, okay, kitty cat lady has this crazy attack that I can't figure out what to do. I can look at this guide and I can go ahead and move or block based on that and do a different thing. I couldn't even figure out blocking. I was having a hard time. Like there was a block mechanic, and I tried. I did try, and I just couldn't figure it
It's
out.
not just like holding back on the D-pad?
I thought it was holding back on the D-pad, and it wasn't. Again,
All right.
this is an
Maybe you gotta,
interesting
like, kick at the same time?
maybe.
Count? I don't know.
This is an interesting episode to do, by the way, because I feel like you and I both have admitted to our audience that fighting games are not really in either one of our repertoire.
Mm-mm. I myself admit it myself that I suck at fighting games.
Me too. And I think Smash Brothers for the N64 was the only fighting game I really got super into. And I say that even including like Smash Brothers for Switch, Smash Brothers for GameCube. Like I played them, but I never really got super into it. So playing a 90s fighting game that's especially not a Mortal Kombat or a Street Fighter was a very interesting experience for me. And I will chalk up some of this to me not being good at video games.
It's okay.
It's okay. Yeah. Yeah. I just want to let that be known because someone might there, like some huge Shaq Fu fan right now, might be screaming into their car that I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm talking about. And guess what I'm saying? You're right. Whatever it is you're yelling, you're right. So I want to get into something that I really enjoyed about the game and something that I think everyone should look at, and that is the art in the game. The art style is really well done, specifically the stages. They look great. Like the
Yeah.
fight with the grandfather, like mentor figure, the sixth fight, the final fight in the first like island that you're on, it looks beautiful. It's like this set of like stunning sunset and these boats in the background. And you're like, whoever made this pixel art just really did a great job. And I want them to get recognized for it. And also, all the characters are, and we'll talk about this in development, are rotoscoped. So they do look really smooth. Like they look really good.
Like
That's
they took actual pic photos or video of
yeah,
people doing
videos
these
of
moves and
someone
then tracing them.
and they traced it onto this art and it just looks really good. Now, does that work for a fighting game? We're going to get into that in a bit. But
It looked
it's
cool from what I saw.
it looks cool, but as far as the mechanics of a fighting game goes, it has some drawbacks. So we'll talk about that. Well, one big drawback. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about is the music in this game. Okay. This music is so good. I specifically want everyone, your homework, if you want to take homework from this podcast, okay, is to go listen to the fight with the Colonel in his secret lab. That's the Metal Super Soldier. That music, specifically when you're fighting him in the secret lab, is really great. And I was like, this is kind of slapping. This is kind of
Wow.
hitting. Yeah,
Is
I'll
it
play it for you after the episode's over.
is it as good as or better than Shaquille O'Neal's 4 studio albums that he put out in the 90s?
No, probably not. I've never listened to those albums, but I do know
One
that
of them is called Shaq Fu, The Return.
the first album, Shaq Diesel, I actually have this in the notes. It broke the Billboard Top 25.
Oh, wow.
It was considered a commercial success.
Okay. All right.
So
Man of
we
many
can't
talents,
we
Shaquille
can't
O'Neal.
judge Shaquille O'Neal for this. If anything, this made me actually like doing this episode. Just made me like Shaquille O'Neal more because he was like my favorite basketball player as a kid. Because again, I love the Orlando Magic, and I had a little pennant on my wall of them, and I loved it. But now I'm just like, you know what? Childhood Mike was right. Shaquille O'Neal's pretty great. Okay.
He seems pretty cool.
Yeah, he's also got some really funny announcing moments because he does like NBA announcing in halftime shows with Charles Barkley, and they just start talking about random things that are not related to basketball, and it's amazing television. I will just throw that just YouTube it someday. Just
It's got to
YouTube,
be a good
yeah,
compilation of
yeah, funny Shaq and Charles Barkley moments in their halftime shows because they just start talking about like I think one time I saw hit the tangent button, Tyler. I saw one where it was either Shaquille O'Neal or Charles Barkley. One of them like could not get over someone's suit in the background, like some guy in like a nice business suit, but it was like a really like weird color scheme. He's like, "Hey, cut that guy's suit. Look at that guy's suit." So they're like trying to talk about basketball, and he's like, "No, we're going to talk about this guy's suit in the background." Like when they're sitting there, it was just so good. It was just like, "Oh, I love this." Like I love it so much. Okay, that
That's
was a quick
fantastic.
tangent. So my overall experience playing the story, because I did play the story mode, is I would have beaten this game. I'm confident I would have beaten this game in half an hour, if not for one fight. One fight. And that fight is the kitty cat lady in that jungle stage called it's called the jungle, but it's Kaori is the character's name. For some reason, that particular fight is on a completely different level than all the other ones. Most of the opponents that I faced, I would beat on the first try without really thinking about it. Okay, and that includes the final boss I beat on the first try. I beat
Wow.
the final boss on the first try. Yeah.
Maybe you are good at video games.
I think I just got lucky. Kaori, though, was an exception because she can teleport around the stage. Where in a game where Shaq appears to be moving in slow motion makes it so much harder than any of the fights that I fought against, like any other opponent, essentially.
Wow.
So I bashed my head against the wall in this fight for about 15 to 20 minutes, and I ended up like saving the state the first time I beat her, which took me like 15 to 20 minutes. If I was playing this game legitimately and I was not using save states, I could see myself spending 4 or 5 hours trying to beat this because
Wow.
that's how much different it is than every other opponent I faced. And it made me so mad when I was playing it because the difficulty spike just went up and then straight back down again. Like after I beat her, a weight was lifted off my shoulders and then I just flew through the rest of the campaign in like probably I say the word campaign like it's actually longer than an hour. I flew through the rest of it in like maybe 20 more minutes. I was done with the
Wow.
whole game and I was rolling credits.
Oh,
Right.
maybe you got so good on that stage. It was just the hyperbolic time chamber just made you so good that you just crushed everything else afterwards.
I don't know, man, but it was a whole new level. Like she's so strong that I actually went into duel mode to play as her, which is like the mode where you can just pick a fight, just a random like exhibition fight. And I still got my butt kicked by someone else as
Dang.
her. So I think it's like, okay, you and I play League of Legends. It's like when you're fighting a champion and you're like, for me, I'm like, Volibear is so good. Volibear, I always lose to Volibear. If I play as Volibear, I am the worst Volibear player that ever lived. But if I play against them, they're going to beat me every time.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that. That's what Kaori's like in Shaq Fu. I think that's why it made me mad because it gave me League of Legends flashbacks.
Reminded you of Volibear.
Remember me of Volibear and Gwen. Those are the two top laners that will just
Oh, yep.
always destroy me. And Tyler knows how to play Gwen really well, everyone. So what I'm saying is if you were wondering about the 1v1 League of Legends matchup between Tyler and I, Tyler's got me every time. So everyone knows. Okay. That should have been a tangent button, but it's too late now.
I pressed it anyway.
Nice, dude. Okay. So now let's get into like my big gripes with this game other than Kitty Cat Lady. She was kind of one of my big gripes, but that's not one's fault but my own. But the big gripe with this game and the one that I think was most like chastised in the reviews are the controls. And part of this is due to that rotoscoping that we were talking about. And I don't really know the technical reason for this. The controls feel less responsive than other fighting games. And a lot of people chalk it up to the animation style of rotoscoping, just not having the reaction time. That doesn't mean they couldn't have fine-tuned it to fix it. But there were times where I'm like, I swear I hit the jump button and it happened like late and then I got hit by a ranged attack. And that would happen constantly in this game.
That makes sense because if it's like a really realistic style, then that means there's like weight and momentum to the animations that are happening, and there's inherent delay in that. Otherwise, you don't have that realism. So sometimes that's not fun, especially in a game where you're like reaction times and like you want to push a button and see the thing happen immediately. If you got to wait for the realistic animation to play, it's like doesn't feel as good, even if it looks cool.
Yeah, for sure. That's exactly it, Tyler. And I think that that wasn't really well received because you think about the time this came out. This is Mortal Kombat. This is Street Fighter. These are two very responsive, good fighting games that Shaq Fu just could not compete with realistically. And that's something that kind of upset people, I think, too. So, but with that said, though, I'm going to save more of this to the end, but I left playing this game, like the gameplay of Shaq Fu overall was a pleasant experience. Like when I finished it, I told some people about it and they were like, dude, that's awesome. Like, cause I could tell, like, when you get like excited to play a game and you're like, oh, this is it. I was like done. And I was like, I kind of wish there was a little bit more, which is perfect because it's not a long game. And realistically, I don't want more. Like I did play some dual mode stuff just to try out different characters and stuff like that. And that was fun. Like it's got that whole you can memorize character special moves in a fighting game. Like a lot of it's just like left, right, left, and then a button. It's not like crazy, but it's got that to it too. But overall, my experience with Shaq Fu gameplay much better than I expected. Now let's talk about the plot of Shaq Fu.
Yes.
So the plot of Shaq Fu is interesting, I guess, is a good way to put it. So remember when I said it's a don't bore us, get to the chorus kind of game? It's not really ideal for a plot. So the story begins with Shaquille O'Neal on his way to an all-star charity basketball game in Tokyo, in downtown. So he's doing some sightseeing, right? He then stumbles upon a kung fu dojo and meets an old kung fu master who tells him that a young boy named Nezu has been kidnapped by an evil mummy named Set. I saw it called Set. Saw him called Set Ra. I'm just going to say Set for the sake of this.
Sure. Seems legit.
Yeah. The old man then says Shaq is, quote, big warrior from the stars. And then Shaq says, well, I'm an all-star. And it's like, ha 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 ha. This is a basketball joke. But this is the pivotal moment in this plot. Like, Tyler, let's say if you're walk into a store. Let's say you live in Los Angeles. You walk into a crystal store. Okay, because there's a lot of crystal stores in LA.
True.
And you meet an old woman, and she's like, Tyler, you are the warrior wizard from the stars. You have to rescue someone. And let's say she opens up the back door to her shop, and there's a portal there. Would you walk through it?
I mean, if the portal looks legit, like a magic portal, yeah. If she's just holding the curtain back and says, there's a portal in here, but I can't see the portal, and it kind of just looks like she's making me go into this room to kidnap me, probably not. Probably going to pass on that.
Okay, because in the game, you're told there's a portal back there, but you don't really see much.
Yeah, it hinges on the realisticness of the portal.
Well, Shaq walks through the portal is what I'm trying to tell you.
Good, because we wouldn't have a game otherwise.
We wouldn't have a game. So then Shaq is teleported to the, quote, second world, which is the name of the place you're at, through a teleporter in the back room of the dojo. And there he must fight various enemies to rescue Nezu and defeat Set Ra. So story-wise, it's similar to Mortal Kombat, as in you're traveling to like an outworld kind of place, but there's no tournament in this case. You are just Shaquille O'Neal and you need to rescue a boy. That is the whole story. Though the weird thing about the story is a lot of the times you're fighting these enemies, it is not explained why. So there's a couple where you see a guy and you're like, okay, well, that guy is like an undead lich thing named Mephis, and he's fighting you in front of these like scary gargoyle statues. So he's probably a bad guy. You're like, okay. And then the next fight, it's like you're fighting an old man who just you start fighting for no reason. And then at the end of the fight, he's like, okay, you're good enough to fight. But when he comes in really hot, like he's an enemy. And then you beat him and he's like, you're cool. And it's like,
all right.
Also, the kitty cat lady, that's like my nemesis, my personal nemesis, you fight her. And then after the fight, she's like, oh, I had a magic ring on my finger that was making me fight this guy. Oh, but now I don't anymore.
Now I'm a good person.
Yeah. You even fight Nezu. You remember the MacGuffin? Kid? The kid that you're trying to rescue? You fight Nezu in third to last fight. You actually beat up this young child you're trying to save. After you beat him, the mind control is gone. He's good now. You could just leave. You could just leave the second world and go back with this kid. But no, you have to go fight the boss. You got to go fight the bad guy because it's a video game, right? Mm-hmm. So it's got like video game rules in the plot. And I get it. I guess I'm complaining. What was I thinking? What did I want? Like a Sopranos level plot in Shaq Fu? I don't know.
Really going to make you think about the moral ambiguity of traveling to another world and beating people up to save a small child.
Right. Yeah. I guess I wanted it to like end with Shaq rap music playing from Shaq Diesel, and then it just abruptly cuts out. And that's how you know that Shaq was killed. Like in Sopranos. Okay. Spoilers to a show that's 30 something years old.
That's not that old.
Oh, really? It's not? Well,
99.
99. Oh, maybe I'll cut that part out.
25. Okay. 25 years old.
That's okay. You know what? 25. That's still pretty old. You know what? Sorry, everybody. Okay. So this is like, the plot is just like, it's not why we're playing Shaq Fu, but I wanted to talk about it because it's silly. The funny, silly plot holes in it are history. Oh, I didn't even talk about the best character in the game. You go into a mine and you fight. What kind of, actually, let's do this. Tyler, what kind of enemy do you expect to see in a mine?
In a mine.
If you go into a mine in a fantasy world, what would you think you're going to fight?
Yeah. I'm expecting to see possessed mine carts.
Okay.
I'm expecting to see probably like bats of some sort to fight. I would be expecting maybe sentient piles of ore that drop iron ore.
Yeah, like rock monsters. That's a good one.
Rock monsters, rock lobsters. Um,
Now
that's kind
on
of it.
on that list, I noticed
Goblins, maybe.
you didn't say longshoreman from Earth.
You know that probably like fourth or fifth on the list, but yeah, I wouldn't. It doesn't make the top of the list.
Okay, because that's what you fight in Shaq Fu is a longshoreman from Earth named Diesel.
How did Diesel get here?
Well, you see, Diesel's the name of Shaq Diesel, the first rap album by Shaquille O'Neal. So
But how
that's
did
why
Diesel get here?
that is not explained. He also just hates you for no reason.
Dang, he's been trapped in the second world for so long that he has grown accustomed to it, born into it, molded by it even, and
Yeah.
now he despises anything from the world which he came.
He is the bane of the Shaq Fu cinematic universe. You are correct, Tyler. I just love that so much. Just a longshoreman. And they make sure that you know he's a longshoreman too.
Named Diesel. All
Named
right.
Diesel. Yeah, that's your piece of trivia, just so you know, is Diesel from Shaq Fu is named after Shaquille O'Neal's first rap album, Shaq Diesel, that came out on October 26, 1993. There's your piece of bar trivia for the episode, if anyone cares or wanted to know. All right, so I mostly included the plot section in here because I think it's so fun. Again, like these are little silly dumb critiques I'm doing of a plot for a video game that's very silly, and the reason we're doing them is because this is so silly to me, and I think it's endearing. It honestly
Mhm.
made me like the game more, is how silly this plot was. Okay, so Shaq Fu was developed, we're in the development section now, by Delphine Software International. They are a French studio known for their cinematic platformers. They made some called like Another World and Flashback, and the studio at the time was popular for their use of rotoscoping, which I mean, we'll get into and we kind of talked about before, but the game was produced in collaboration with Electronic Arts and Shaquille O'Neal, and the idea was to create a game that combined O'Neal's larger-than-life persona with the popular fighting game genre at the time. And they were like martial arts and Shaq Fu. This kind of works.
And he was
Now,
into martial arts too, or maybe still is.
yeah, he's like into it. You know what I mean? Like, and I think the thing about it is there, like, this is we don't have a lot of history, okay, but I am going to read two quotes from that Next Generation magazine article because the article was called like "What the hell happened?" Right? That's what it's called, and so we can gather that at the time this was not received well. This video game. Now it is a cult classic now in a lot of people's minds, and I would agree with that, as seen by the plot and the gameplay section just above. I'm gushing over this game. I find it very fun. I want to get a Shaq Fu poster and put it up in my room. That's how I feel about this game. So this is a quote though in that Next Generation magazine article from an anonymous EA employee that says, quote, "We had Shaquille O'Neal signed up for the game, but we didn't really know what to do with him. Someone heard that Shaq was into martial arts and thought, hey, why not do a fighting game? And this sounded like a pretty neat idea. Then we figured that seeing as we've got access to Shaquille O'Neal, we really ought to make the most of the opportunity. We didn't want to just feature a game sprite that looked a bit like him. What would be the point? So this is where the idea for using Delphine's rotoscoping technology came from. It all seemed to make sense, but I guess in the end, you've got to conclude that it was executed as well as anyone could have hoped, and it's not as if anyone really screwed up. It was just a lousy idea to begin with."
Yeah.
End quote. So it just like they were excited about this and they were hyped about it and they thought it was a good idea. And in the end, it just was like a swing and a miss.
It's a game that came from an idea probably not put forward by people who know much about games or why they're popular. They're just it's sort of like I feel like there's a lot of movies nowadays too, but then as well, where it was just like, I don't know, get this popular person or IP and just like make a movie out of it and you're gonna be fine. And it seemed like there were a lot of video games like that back in those days as well.
Yeah, exactly. Very, very true. And that actually is a great segue that you just made into my next quote. Great job, Tyler. This is from Bing Gordon, Executive VP of Marketing and the co founder of Electronic Arts. Quote, "The key learning from Shaq Fu and Michael Jordan Chaos in the Windy City was painful but simple. Don't make sports figures into cartoon characters." End quote.
No, it worked for the Harlem Globetrotters and Scooby Doo.
I mean, it did. And also Michael Jordan in the Windy City, Chaos in the Windy City, that's a game I need to cover. And that
Yeah.
looks amazing
Also
also.
made by EA.
Also made by EA. Also very similar to this. I don't think it has quite the cult following that Shaq Fu does, but still something we need to talk about probably.
The story was, if I'm not mistaken, the story was written by Amy Hennig of Jack and Daxter fame and the Uncharted series. She wrote those games as well, and Legacy of Kain games.
Are you serious?
Yeah, like highly well regarded storyline in games. She did Chaos in the Windy City as well.
I love it. I love that. I'm excited to cover that game next too. So
So
now,
so I'm expecting a masterpiece of a story here.
oh, me too. I mean, I'm excited to play it. So okay, let's go on though to the last part of the development here, and that I kind of touched on this earlier, but I was really looking for an interview with Shaquille O'Neal about this game, like just some sort of like magazine interview or something. And I couldn't really find one. That doesn't mean there isn't one out there. That just means in my searching for it, I just couldn't find one. And so until we get the legend, the man himself, Shaquille O'Neal on this podcast, we will probably never know. But I feel like as we grow and become a bigger podcast, the opportunity for us to have Shaquille O'Neal come on here and talk about Shaq Fu and then Shaq Fu, A Legend Reborn, the newer game, is promising. So I
Yeah.
feel like that could happen, right?
Every time you tell your friends about our podcast and get them to listen, we get a little bit closer to getting Shaquille O'Neal on the show.
And while Shigeru Miyamoto is already a friend of the podcast, I mean, he's a very busy schedule, and he told us that he will not be on the podcast until we get a lot of people listening. So just so
Yeah,
you all know.
and he wanted to go after Shaquille O'Neal.
He did. Yes, he wanted to go after Shaquille O'Neal. That's what he told me on AOL Instant Messenger. That's what we use to communicate still. All right. So let's do like a little conclusion wrap up thing, though, about this real quick. So I guess there is kind of a twofold legacy to Shaq Fu. First is that this was, as Tyler had mentioned earlier, this game, when it came out, was on a lot of worst games of all time lists. But what I noticed in going through this is as time has gone on, it's kind of slowly moved back on those lists. Like initially it was like in third place as one of the worst games of all time. And now it's like if it's on the list, it's like far up or it's not on the list at all to a lot of people. And I think that's because this game does have a cult following. And I'm going to say something a little controversial maybe, and this is my opinion. I think Shaq Fu is a successful video game. Now, I'm
Okay.
not using the term good. I'm not going to say good or bad. I am going to say successful in that it accomplishes what it was meant to do. And it brought Shaquille O'Neal into a video game where he does kung fu and he does fighting. It doesn't mean it's the best video game in that genre, but I think it's fun. It's just this is one of those topics where we've talked about before where it's like, okay, if a video game is fun, can it be bad? I don't think it can be. I think it's like if it's fun, that means it's good, right? And our mutual friend Aaron actually worked at a company, he told me, and I'm not going to name the company, but he worked at a company that had 3 copies of Shaq Fu. And at the office, they would all play Shaq Fu together. And so if that doesn't sell this game to people, I don't know what will. That was like 10 years ago, he said. It was like they were doing that. So like probably like 5 or 6 years ago, actually. So it's like, it's not a bad game in that sense. I think there's like a love for this game that a lot of people have. And now that I have played the game myself, I have that love too. Like I will always remember doing our podcast and covering Shaq Fu because
it's just a ridiculous premise of a game.
Yeah, this last week was really fun playing this game and doing research on it. Like I had a really good time. So I hope that came across in this episode. Now, we're going to briefly talk about Shaq Fu, A Legend Reborn. That is a game that came out on June 5th, 2018. It is on Switch. I don't know if it's on Steam. I didn't actually look that up, but it's definitely on Switch. It should be on actually all the consoles now that I think about it. Like it should be on Xbox and PlayStation as well. But
It is on Steam. It's $20.
Okay, they ditched the fighting genre completely for Shaq Fu: A Legend Reborn. It is a beat 'em up game. It is completely a beat 'em up game. It is a comedic game that pokes fun at the idea of celebrity and Shaquille O'Neal's career itself. Okay, like it makes fun of that kind of thing. Now, I'm never going to say never because you just don't know with this podcast. We will probably not cover this game. I will tell you that the humor in the game sounds like it has not aged very well. And while the beat 'em up
Even in the
game,
last like 6 years? Dang.
yeah, even like as the beat 'em up genre, it's like it's still a good beat 'em up game. Apparently, it's not. It just doesn't seem like it seems really repetitive. It's kind of got Duke Nukem Forever's problem, where it just was a lot of the same thing over and over again, and that's why it kind of felt bland.
Yeah, and because it's like trying to be funny, that it like sort of falls flat. Like Shaq Fu, the original, was not trying to be what it is, and that's kind of why it works.
I watched a couple different reviews on YouTube of Shaq Fu: A Legend Reborn just to kind of get a feel for the game because I didn't want to buy it. I didn't want to play it. It just doesn't seem like my kind of game. And a lot of them were saying the same thing where they're like, the comedy in the first stage is like really funny and you laugh, but then you realize the whole game are those same jokes rehashed over and over and over again. And then it kind of like wears you down. And it's one of the reviews even said they think Shaq Fu, the original, is better than Shaq Fu: A Legend Reborn. And I'm like,
Dang, shots fired.
that's saying something. So yeah, probably never going to cover that game. But so in the end, I'm going to say this. I would recommend playing Shaq Fu. If you are interested in a game that is going to make you smile in its silliness and like, but it's like trying to be serious, which is why the silliness is fun with it. Shaq Fu is a great bet. I would highly advise you to play Shaq Fu over a game like Duke Nukem Forever. I would do that realistically. And the best part about it is like we talk about it a lot, but like it's pretty cheap. Like I looked up the Sega Genesis version of the game is like $5
Dang,
online. It's
that's
not
pretty
expensive.
good.
Yeah,
Even for a game that's like infamous.
yeah, I actually found an eBay copy of it for $13 that had the case and the manual, and I think I'm going to buy it today because
Nice. Do it.
I want that piece of like history, you know, because I'm like, as a guy who's getting into like collecting, $13 to have a piece like that, it seems like something I would really enjoy, and I would love to put it on a shelf and be like, that's my copy of Shaq Fu.
Yeah.
Okay.
Genesis games like are nice to collect in that way too, because a lot of them are still with the box and everything, because the box functioned as a case, unlike Super
Yeah.
Nintendo games, or just like cardboard to throw away.
Yeah, exactly. It's true. It's so true. So yeah, but things I like about the game, the art and the music carry the game, like the whole mood of it. It's super 90s. It's super weird. And you can tell there's like love put into it for that. The plot is bad, but I think it's supposed to be. Like I'm convinced that they were like, you know what? Let's make this plot be silly because that's what it's supposed to be. And all in all, if you want to experience the game, I played the Sega Genesis version on an emulator. From my understanding, the rotoscope control response is better with the Genesis version than the Super Nintendo version. Also, the music is going to be better on the Sega Genesis version than the Super Nintendo version.
As was often the case with games on both platforms.
So I would keep that in mind. If you want to play it, I would play it on Sega Genesis. So yeah, that's it though with our story of Shaq Fu. Up next, I think I want to cover Michael Jordan Chaos in the Windy City. I don't know when that would be, but I want to talk about it because I'm on this kick of like celebrity games that are not about what they're famous for. I also
we gotta do the 50 Cent games. Blood on the Sand.
I mean,
gosh, I love that game.
We could talk Blood on the Sand. Also, I mean, there's Moonwalker as well.
Yeah.
And that's like pretty popular. That's an arcade game you can play still. So that's another one too. So there's a lot of good stuff here, and I'm just excited to talk about it all. But Tyler, what you been playing?
Well, this week, so I went back to visit some family for a week, so I was away from many of my games, but I did bring Super Mario RPG, the Switch remake, with me.
How was it?
It's pretty good. I have 5 of the 7 stars, the titular 7 stars of Legend. So I have 5 of them, and I'm about 8 or 9 hours in. So how long to beat has it pegged at like 15 or 16 hours, but I feel like I'm a little bit further along than halfway through it, but I don't know. I guess we'll see. Maybe it stretches out at the end, but I'm having a great time with it. I think it's a really good, like baby's first JRPG. It has a lot of things in it that more modern JRPGs do now, where like there are random battles, but they are on the overworld and you can avoid them, which was not really the thing to do in 1996. That was that didn't become more popular in JRPGs until like, I want to say like 10 or 15 years ago. So yeah, it's super fun. I highly recommend it. And then I'm going to branch off into Paper Mario and then the Mario and Luigi series as well. I kind of want to just play through them all. So I'm having a great time with that. Otherwise, I played a little bit of Destiny. I'm trying to keep up on the story stuff that's coming out every week and get some of the easier pinnacles done. I'm almost at the pinnacle cap, which means then it's just going to be grinding
the actual artifact to get
that. And that's quite a grind, but I would like to get to the point we can do some Grandmaster Nightfalls at some point. I think that would be fun. Otherwise, that's kind of it. I still spending time in Unreal, making slow, steady progress on my dumb little game that nobody will ever see probably, but I'm still working on it.
But you know what? I get to see it, and that's what's important.
Yeah, maybe I'll get to a place where I'll be comfortable like just showing it to people, because it's not fun right now. It's like it's not even a whole game. I'm just like going in and doing whatever I want and adding systems. The systems like math stuff is way more complicated than it needs to be, but I'm having fun making it. So
that's the key then. Yeah, it's like that's the fun part of it. Yeah, I love that. Well, that's great. Well,
What have you been playing?
I've been playing a little Destiny as well. I actually just did the last week of the episode, so I am still a week behind. I was going to play it probably tonight, actually, and just like grind through the episodic content.
I'll probably join you because I'm caught up to this week, but I'm not. I haven't done.
Oh, well, yeah, we could do it. Let's do it together. That'll be more fun for sure.
Okay.
And yeah, it's like picking up rock samples and doing stuff like that. That's really what it is. It feels a lot like geology, the game. So I'm playing that. But the big one, and I mentioned this, I believe, a couple weeks ago. I am playing Dishonored. I actually had a long play session last night. So we record on Sundays, full disclosure, and I spent my Saturday night because I am alone. My wife's been gone, as seen by my Instagram videos every single day.
But she's going back soon.
She comes back very soon. She just packed the car up and she's on her way home, and I'm like so excited because it's funny when you're like used to being with someone for so long and then they're gone. And you'll be like, I'll be fine, and then like a week after, you're just like, are you coming home soon? So yeah. Also, Delilah is like just ready. She's so ready for her real parent to come home and not have the spare here. So, but yeah. So I've been playing Dishonored, and I really am enjoying this game, and I forget how polished. And we're gonna keep Redfall out of this. We're keeping Redfall. We're just pretending Redfall doesn't exist. How polished Arcane games feel. Like that just feels so.
What else do they make?
They made Dishonored. Oh my gosh. They do Prey?
Maybe Arcane Games. Arcane Studios.
Didn't they do Thief too?
Prey, you're right. They did do Prey.
They did Prey. Okay. Dishonored. Deathloop was the big one too. And they also did Dark Messiah of Might and Magic, the game that I loved, that I was talking about, that I like really, really, really dug, that I did on the podcast. Like that games I love too. Gosh, why did I forget that? I'm so enveloped in Shaq Fu. I can't think about anything else. But I love Dishonored so much, and I'm not a big stealth game guy. In fact, I would say that stealth games are a genre I would avoid because they kind of stress me out. It's one of the reasons I never played Splinter Cell, which I know
I love Splinter Cell.
You love Splinter Cell, and and this is inspiring me that I should play Splinter Cell. Also, the Hitman games, which are very popular, where you can kind of like do because that's kind of what Dishonored is. It's more like a Hitman style game of you can do these assassination missions in any way you want to. Kind of, it's like
Deathloop is like that too, I think.
Yeah, and it's very, very fun. I am kind of playing it like however I just play it naturally on my first try. I just want to see what the ending's like with me just playing it how I feel. And I mostly try to not kill people, but there are definitely times where I screw up and I'm not going to reload the save. So I'm going to fight these guards and kill them. And then I'm going to go back to trying to be sneaky. And that's kind of how I've played the game. And that's been more fun, honestly. I am also doing the non-lethal ways to kill the big bads. I did kill the first big bad because I didn't know that there was like a non-lethal way to kill all of them. And now every single other person I've done like the non-lethal way to do it. So I'm almost done. I think I have 2 missions left and I'm really close to the end because I think the last mission might just be like a cutscene or whatever, like one of those kind of things. So
quick time event.
Yeah. Oh God, I hope
2012.
Not. Oh, it could be, dude. It could be. Now that you just put a worm in my brain and now I'm terrified, honestly. Oh, you might get me. So, but yeah, I'll let you know next week. Hopefully I beat it this week. And I don't know if I'll start Dishonored 2 right away. There's some other games I kind of want to try, but this was always on my list of a game to play. And I'm glad I played it. It's on Game Pass. And I feel like I should play more Game Pass games because the price just went up. And
yeah,
it's a bummer. It's a hot bummer.
Yeah.
So
it's still worth it mostly, but it becomes less worth it the more they raise the price.
It's $20 a month right now for the one I have. And I can play games on PC and on my Xbox. And I get day one access. So it's worth it for me in that sense, especially since I am playing a lot of games that are older, which is kind of nice because I could do an episode on Dishonored now, I feel like, if I want to, but we'll see. So yeah, but with that, things you can do to support our podcast, go to codexpodcast.net. That is our website that has all our links on there. Our Discord server link to join the Discord's on there. Don't forget when you join the Discord, you have to say yes to the rules and then you can see all the channels. That's the big thing about it. And you can also send us a contact form there, or you can email us at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. Tyler's on Twitter. I'm on Twitter. We also have an Instagram that we'd really appreciate a follow on. And I try to post videos up there. And next week, I don't know what we're doing next week. It's kind of a mystery to both of us.
Figure it out.
We'll see what happens next week. But with that, would you like to say goodbye to everybody, Tyler?
Yeah. Goodbye, everybody.